how good do our estimates work compared to what is called cycle time, right? Which is like, how long does it take from starting a work item, let's say a user story, bug, task, whatever you have, till it's done. What our assumption was, if our estimation works, is that you have somewhat a linear line. So if things are estimated lower, they are also done quicker. So the cycle time is lower. Reality is that it feels very random, right? Because what we could see is maybe something is estimated with 21 story points, but it took only 3 days, while something else is estimated with 5 story points and it takes 20 days.
For that, I also like to use a lot this SLE, because we should close items in 10 days or less. That's the most items, the 85%, right? And then we can aim for that. And that can be the very easy discussion of how we should split items. Will it take more than 10 days? We should split it. Is it like very small? Then it's okay. Don't forget that we both are pro Kanban trainers. We are happy to host a training in your company. Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Chec, and I have with me Benji. Hi, Benji.
Hi, Maria.
Welcome to Agile State of Mind. I would like to continue talking about Flowmetrics in Kanban. And after my recent conversation with Colleen Johnson, the CEO of ProKanban.org, where we talked about the Flowmetrics, how they appear in our everyday life, and also why estimations is a waste of time, like estimating and making a lot of emphasis on it is really a waste of time. Today, I invited Benji, who is a pro Kanban trainer as well, to talk about not only the metrics that you know already, and we will do a short refresher, but also how to visualize them and how to get to this next level of using the metrics, making sense of how they appear and what they mean, and different ways of visualizing them. Today, I invited Benji Huser-Berta, who is a fellow, as I said, fellow pro Kanban trainer. He's also a trainer and a speaker at conferences where he puts a lot of attention to the metrics, the probabilistic forecasting. That's how we met on the ALE, I always say ALE, the Agile Lean conference in Europe where we were together. I really like how you explain the deterministic thinking, which is we have an estimation and that's a deadline, versus probabilistic thinking, how to make predictions, forecasts, and how that can be a better way, maybe less violent way of communicating and sharing the forecast. So I would like to start with, if you could explain what you actually do and how did you get to this metrics visualization?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm a trainer for Pro Kanban. So I'm doing this as well as I'm a former software developer, or I studied software engineering. So I have some coding technical background. So I was mainly in the last 5 years a Scrum Master in a company where I worked with different teams kind of day to day as well. And there I discovered some years back kind of the magic of Flowmetrics and also probabilistic forecasting.
Yeah, and you actually started not only using the probabilistic forecasting, but actually tailoring it for your needs and for the team's needs. Could you explain? Because you even created your own company out of that.
Yeah, so we started to use the tools that were available for visualizing the different things, but also then trying to run forecasts. And as it is in real world scenarios, it was not perfectly matching what we needed at the time. So we started kind of playing around with, could we do it ourselves? And it turns out like Flowmetrics and forecasting, it's quite simple to do the things on your own.
That's good to know.
So maybe we get more into this in a bit. But
we will, because especially because, you know, when you use Jira, it would seem it must be so hard because Jira can't do it for you, right? So it must be like some science that few people can do. So I'm glad you say it's quite easy.
It's very basic math that we need, and it helps if you have a computer that can run it for you, but you could do it manually as well. So if you're not into coding or not into math, like it will work anyway. So I'm confident that everybody that is interested can try these things out, either by hand or via a tool or writing your own tool as well.
Great. And we will show that. So today we will be showing and Benji will be explaining what we see so that you can really get to see what can be done and how easily you can access all the data that, by the way, you already have, right? That's the beauty of Flowmetrics. It's not something that you need to start creating some calculations and filters in Jira to get that data. You already have it. It's just to retrieve it. But then I also wanted to talk about one curiosity you shared with me. So you are a Scrum Master, you were a developer, and you became a Pro Kanban trainer, even though you have a professional Scrum Master 3 certification, which is like super advanced. How did it happen that you actually became a Pro Kanban trainer and not a Scrum trainer?
Yeah, very, very interesting question. Like the PSM3 is quite a tough exam, so I think not many people try it. And on my journey getting this, you really dive into theory of Scrum, and you need a lot of real world experience that I had from working with my teams in everyday life. The more I
think it's, I wanted to ask because I think it's not even like a quiz anymore, because usually when you pass the exams, you just have like multiple choice questions. I think in the third one, you actually have to write like an essay and you
it's
are
like essay
interviewed.
Questions. An actual human is checking your answer. So it takes a couple of weeks to get the results. So, and it's funnily enough, like you really need the experience because you don't have so much time to type all the stuff in. So you cannot think too long to answer a question. So you should have some real world experience. At least that was my experience from taking the assessment and preparing.
Okay, so congrats. And what happened? What did you learn?
Well, so let's say I still like Scrum, so I'm not against this, and I think it works pretty well together with Kanban. What happened when I dove into the details of Scrum and what is it really suited for? I just noticed that it may not be useful for the problems we are having right now in the company I was with at the time. So the main problem was, how can we get more predictability, because the company was kind of bidding for projects. And then it was like, okay, you won, you need to deliver this and this by, I don't know, June 25. And these are the specs. And it included like 5 different products of our company that then had to be ready, right, at this point in time. Otherwise, you might get fines for every week or month you're late. So that was kind of the issue.
Hard deadlines.
Yes.
Okay, and so you noticed that the way actually, I think it's this problem that we try to use Scrum and Kanban, especially when we don't know either, interchangeably, right? As if it is one or the other. And there was always this, should we do Scrum? Should we do Kanban? Maybe let's do Scrumban. And then I think it's, as I see it, it's more like a complementary solutions, not one or the other. And then actually that's the thing, like Scrum doesn't give you a lot about flow management and predictability. It's not there at all. It's even estimations and story points that people consider is part of Scrum is not there. So yeah, I think it really makes sense to use it as complementary, right? And even though, and not getting caught up by, okay, I'm doing Scrum, it has to be perfect. Maybe we don't have to do perfect Scrum. We just have to do something that's good for our teams, that responds to the needs. And your needs are different than mine, because I never have such a like cemented deadline. If we, of course, it's not seen with happy eyes if somebody says we are missing the deadline, we will deliver in, maybe we need 2 more weeks, and then 2 more, and so on. It's like, okay, not great, but we can live with it. But in your case, I see that it was a problem and you had to know where something will be done. So what was the first step? If you have such a deadline, what do you do?
So maybe I can take you on that journey with me. So, and also we didn't say I went to the Kanban training, now let's throw out Scrum and do Kanban, but actually we just started looking at what is the first problem. And maybe I share my screen.
If you could also explain a bit the Flowmetrics that we can see, so that it's a refresher as well for those that already forgot the 4 Flowmetrics that we have.
Yeah. So I will start with some other chart, which is, I would say, one of my favorite charts, which looks at cycle time and estimation and compares kind of how well the estimation was. compared to the cycle time, because this was, as mentioned, we wanted predictability and we were using story points at the time. And then I was reading some of the work from Dan Vacanti and looking a bit into his podcast he has with Pratik Singh. And I realized, there might be this other thing that we should check out. And one of the things initially we were doing is, how good do our estimates work compared to what is called cycle time, right? Which is like, how long does it take from starting a work item, let's say a user story, bug, task, whatever you have, till it's done. And
that's also the importance of Kanban, to actually define those points, right? Because
yes, exactly.
It's interesting how different, if you even ask different roles in your team, they might consider different points true for start and end. So as a team, we first agree where is the start, where is the end, and that's what we will measure, right?
And once you have this, you basically have all the data you need for all the metrics we were going to show and explain to you.
Yeah, and that's a great news. And I love it. I think it's also the part of, we are so used to story points and estimations. And it's hard to say, whatever you do, you just can count the number, like you have the cycle time here, but then we will talk about the throughput. So it's so good to have this comparison so that we can really see if what works best. So please go ahead.
So here, what you see, or also for the people maybe just listening and not seeing the screen, is like on the x-axis, you see our estimation, which was in story point. It could be ideal days or man hours or whatever things you use, or I don't know, potatoes or whatever measure you're using. And on the y-axis, it's the cycle time, like how long did it take to complete this item. And what our assumption was, if our estimation works, is that you have somewhat a linear line. So if things are estimated lower, they are also done quicker. So the cycle time is lower. Reality is that it feels very random, which is kind of, or it did explain why we're not predictable in terms of if we use the estimations and try to create the project plan based on this, right? Because what we could see is maybe something is estimated with 21 story points, but it took only 3 days, while something else is estimated with 5 story points and it takes 20 days. So it's not really useful then to base your plans on this data. And that was kind of where it's like, I think we should not try to get better at estimating, but maybe try this Flowmetrics thing and probabilistic forecasting instead. So that was kind of the trigger. And it's very interesting because in every team we tried and did this chart, it basically looks similar always. I haven't seen yet a team where you really get more or less a linear line. Maybe it's just the teams I worked with. So feel free to prove me wrong, but this is something I encourage everybody to try it out because it's quite eye-opening.
And that's a tool that we can just take and use with our existing tracking tool, whatever we use, if it's Jira or Azure DevOps. So we can just plug it in, right? And see this.
Exactly. So maybe I can mention I'm showing the tool that I created. There are others around. Maybe you can also share. There was recently a blog post from Pro Kanban sharing a lot of free, really available tools. So
yeah, definitely. I can share it in the description, but I also want to share yours because I really see this is like, for me, the first point we should do with the teams. And then we can have a conversation. And I really encourage people. Now we have spring. And it's like a perfect time to say, hey, what if we do a spring tidying up, our sprint cleanup, right? Okay. And let's see what we have. And let's see, because sometimes it's hard to say about, we will get there probably, like, oh, shouldn't all the items be the same size if you only want to count well, how is that working? But what happens here is like, you can ask, like, what do you think is happening? Maybe you actually, the story that you had 21 points, well, that's actually the outlier, but maybe you had a story that you only had 3 points, but it took many days because you were blocked. Something happened. You couldn't keep going. There was a dependency, right? And it's really hard to take that into consideration for everything. When you estimate, you basically estimate the time coding and not the time waiting, right?
And maybe the one that was estimated 21 story points and then was done in, I think, 3 days, maybe there the team said, well, if all 4 of us work on this together, we have a better chance of getting it done, right? Which is exactly the conversations we want to have, but then we don't need this extra step of estimation for it, right? So it's more, but we will get there, but cycle time can be really useful for this.
Okay, yeah, let's continue.
And maybe just one addition here, like as you mentioned, the tool would work with Azure DevOps and Jira, but also with like CSV input. So many tools, you can just export it into a CSV file and then generate your charts to get started. That may be the easiest way of trying it out before you invest a lot in connecting your tools, or you need some special permissions maybe. So a CSV usually is easy.
Like I said, that we are this enterprise level company in OutSystems, and maybe I need like security team to clear it for me. So then it's easier to just, okay, I don't connect anything to my data. I just export the data and check. Yeah, okay.
And the cool thing is you only need like this, when was an item started, when was it finished, and maybe some kind of ID, but it's quite anonymous, right? So whatever you see here is like random numbers as labels, right? But you cannot really infer what it is exactly.
Okay, so let's continue, because you have more than this. So this would be great to start, to really have many conversations of what happened and how it might not be the best tool.
And you can just try this out, right? There's no harm. Like you don't even have to ask anybody. It's just like, let me check this out and maybe once share it within a team just to see, hey, somehow this estimation thing might not work. And it's a good kind of kickoff to think about other metrics. Like, for example, cycle time. So this was what we concluded then instead of estimates. What if we would use cycle time instead for our, like, or in place of estimations, and try to focus on this a bit more? So what do you see, Maria, here on this picture?
So I see a lot of dots. And as you say, that for those that don't see, we have on one axis, we have the cycle time in days, and on the other one, we have the calendar days.
Yes.
And then we have, this is what actually I think the only chart that you can somehow get in Jira. It's the scatter plot, right? They have a similar chart where you see the dots reflect your user stories, and we can see how long, when they were finished, and how long it took for them to get done, right?
Exactly. And so what you also have is like 4 lines here that are these percentiles. So you can see, for example, the 50th percentile means 50% of all the items were done in this many days or less. And the other 50% took longer than this amount. So here it would be 6 days. So this means if you start some item today, there is like a 50% chance that this item is done within the next 6 days. But there is also 50% chance that it takes now longer. So this is kind of your risk level associated to get it done in 6 days, one single item.
And also here you see those lines have different colors, because the bigger risk, the more highlighted, right? So red is like 50% risk, and then you have the less risk, the more green it becomes.
Yes, exactly.
And here you have the legend, so you can see which means what. And this is interesting. So how does this change the conversation about when will this be done?
Yes, so you can use these percentiles. I think often people use 85 or maybe 70th percentile. I think somebody started once with 85, but it's not really set in stone. So think about how risky can you be, right? Because even 70% is still quite certain that you manage. So maybe think about using this. And in this example, 10 days is kind of the number where we get 70% of all our items done. So you can think about, A, is this fast enough? Is it maybe too fast? Maybe we're optimizing too much, just to also bring in, if you have some process that you can just deliver something every 2 months, maybe you don't need to be as fast, right? So you might be optimizing the wrong thing. Just to also look a bit at from this angle, because usually it's just faster. But you can talk about this with your team. Like, would we be happy with this? what I often see is if you run, for example, a 2-week sprint and your 70 percentile is 18 days, that's already strange, for example, right? Because if it means most likely you have to start before your sprint starts to get your items done in this time. So, I mean, again, I cannot judge. Maybe your sprints are too short, but more likely, maybe you can think about how to get this number down. And
exactly. So you are starting to talk about the SLE, which is
yes,
like the service level expectation. That is it's not a flow metric, but it's a very important metric or tool to use when you want to establish how long it takes for you to deliver stuff. And could you just explain a little for the sake of clarity? Because what I saw recently, we had some conversations about SLOs and different things. And do you count the weekends? Do you not? So how does that work? So if I work in a Scrum and I have 2-week sprints, my SLE would be 15 days or 10, or the days that we 10 days. So if you could just explain a bit how that works.
So I would always use just regular calendar days, because the whole idea is that you look back, right? How did you kind of perform with your team in the past? And then you can use this for predicting the future in a sense. So I would argue you had weekends in the past, so you also have weekends in future. I sure hope so.
You're right. You don't work all the time. But that's also the beauty of those metrics. We just have it as it is in life, right? We don't try to say, that was a weekend, so we shouldn't count, shall we? Those conversations are out. Like, they don't bring any value. Let's just, our life has weekends. We usually don't work on them. That's what we have. And then we are just free of those we're removing waste as well, right?
Exactly. You don't need somebody that takes care. And we were jokingly saying at times, it's been like 4 or 5 years since we filled in an Excel spreadsheet where we track like who is off when, because, well, people are sick, people are on vacation, there will be public holidays and so on. And if you look just back in your history, this happened in the past, so it will happen in the future. So you don't need to take any action there, which is the nice thing. And
okay, so you don't even measure that. But isn't it that, for example, there will be days that it's a bit different, like in the summer where people take more holidays than usual, or I would say that maybe August would be a bit like December, but not as much as February, where there's no bank holidays and people usually typically don't take holidays. Isn't that like a difference?
Well, you're not in Switzerland where people go skiing in February, but
right.
Well, I mean, I would say you should take this into account. It's a great example in the chart here, because you could see it's actually December and January, and you see towards the end of December, a bit left of the center of the chart, there is a bit of a hole, right? Because most people were off during Christmas, because this team most likely was mainly based in Europe, where I think it's usually days off in this period. So there are some items kind of on top that were getting done in this period, but you could see they aged a bit more. But just take this into account when you plan, but you don't need to like overthink this, right? So there's maybe it's still good to have a human look at these things and interpret the data. So, and this is why you don't want to maybe watch just the numbers, but visualizing this will give you clues. So you spot patterns, right? So you might see, hey, there's something here that is a bit blank that looks odd. And then you look at the date and maybe you find an explanation, or you just ask the team, what are they seeing here is something strange, which like the visuals can really help. Because it's quite simple what we're seeing, but then you can interpret, and there's like often different interpretations, and that's great, kind of to involve your team. Don't just look at this in isolation, like trying to optimize without even asking the team. But another example might be,
I agree, because we can be the best people to know all about the metrics, but if we don't include the team and don't include their buy-in and also their understanding, because on the other hand, we also have this, what gets measured gets managed, and then you start to game the system. But if you just show it as it is, not a blaming reality, but like, oh, what can we learn from it? Do our sprints make sense? Do our user stories make sense? Maybe we need to split them in smaller. Maybe we need to do something like, right? There is this conversation that we can use. So just to come back and finish the one about SLE. So SLE is a great tool for us to be able to define how long it takes with everything that's included in our system, all the interruptions, everything that happens, not just the coding, how long it takes for us to deliver something. And then we can base it, and then we can use it as a benchmark to forecast as well, right?
Yes, for individual items. So if you want to just forecast when will this bug that somebody just reported be done, you can use this or basically your cycle time data with the percentiles. Also, and I think this ties a bit into what you said before about gaming the system or smaller items. So one thing I always thought, it's great if we game this, because if it means we're bringing cycle time down in a somewhat controlled manner, and this is where I felt as a Scrum Master, I should make sure we're not faking numbers, but we're actually kind of doing something that is meaningful to get the numbers down. That is a good improvement. So what we did in our team, for example, would be SLE is we want to get 85% of all items done in 10 days or less. And then we would look at the cycle time scatter plot, look at the percentile. See here, right now it's at 12 days, so we have to improve a bit, right? So that might be okay over the last month. It may be explainable due to Christmas, for example. No need to panic here, but just you can track this if you hold your commitment to this expectation. And what it helps us doing is we can replace the estimates, right? So instead of estimating how many points do you think that is, you can ask, will we get this done in 10 days or less? Like, is it possible? And usually what we did is there is like very clear yes. Then we don't need to have a further discussion. If the team is confident, then no need. There is maybe like, it could be doable, but might be tight. Then we may have another discussion about, okay, what do you need to get this done in 10 days? Like, and then what if two people worked on it together, for example?
Exactly. So then there are also a lot of techniques, which we usually, when we teach the applying professional Kanban class, we explain a lot of techniques, what you can do to make this happen, to actually unblock the items. And there are a lot of things you can do to just improve the way you work, which means also improve kind of the health of the system, right? We don't want these big outliers like we have here, because then they will bring the whole cycle time for the whole system up if there are such a big outliers, right?
Exactly.
Okay, let's see another one. So this one is scatter plot. As we see, those are like scattered balls, scattered all around. The easiest explanation.
Exactly. And it's cycle time, so it means you basically see it for all the items that are done. So, and the other thing that you see on all the things that are done is like, this is the throughput. So what your throughput is how many items did you close or get to done in a certain period of time. So it can be per day, per week, per sprint, per month, per release, whatever you choose. Normally visualize this is we look at on each day, how much did we get done on this day over a certain period. So here you have again the dates on the x-axis at the bottom and how many items did we close each of this day. And here you can actually quite nicely see the Christmas break, right? So there's like a gap where we didn't get anything done, which is explainable. And you can somewhat spot the weekends in between as well, especially in December. Every few days you have like a 2-day where nothing was closed, which is a good sign for health of the team, that they didn't feel like they need to work on weekends.
Definitely the good culture of the company as well.
And
then we have some outliers, right?
So you have outliers kind of in both directions. Like the obvious ones is where you didn't close anything, but even outliers on days where it's like, we have 4 or more items closed on the same day, while normally it's more 1 or 2. that is interesting, right? Because like what happened, there was one day where we closed 7 items. Like, why did this happen? And if you look at the whole thing, there's like almost 2 weeks, I think, where we closed 1 item. And then we have like quite a lot of items closed at the same time. So that's quite interesting, wondering what happened there. Was systems down? Was, I don't know, a QA engineer not around? So things were stuck somewhere. And in our, like, we will not dive into probabilistic forecasting, at least not today, right? But for a good forecast, you don't want these outliers also not kind of upwards. So you may think we closed 7 items one day, that's great, which, yeah, it's not bad. The question is more, why did we not kind of better flow before? Like, why were we waiting that long? And this is a pattern you, like, in certain Scrum teams, you can see when they start sprints and when they end, because there's like nothing closed for 1.5 weeks, and then everything gets closed in the end, kind of rushed in. And then again, you don't see things getting closed again. And I think what we're aiming is more continuous flow rather than the rush towards the end of a sprint, for example.
Yeah, true. And I remember also to see not only that, but also, for example, there will be a sprint that's not many things closed, but a lot of things open. And then the next sprint, suddenly so many things closed because they closed the spillovers, right? And then again, there will be less because we started opening new ones. And then again, another sprint. And then you would have like those. And this is so many patterns we can see in those teams because we never look at, okay, how we can improve the flow and how we can actually make our, I'm like obsessed with this health of system. In Scrum, we are never taught about this. And then you learn Kanban, and then you learn how important it is to understand what we can do to ensure that health of the system. For that, I also like to use a lot this SLE. Because we define, we should close items in 10 days or less. That's the most items, the 85%, right? And then we can aim for that. And that can be the very easy discussion of how we should split items. Will it take more than 10 days? We should split it. Is it like very small? Then it's okay. We will keep closing items every day, right? And that's where we want to go. And you don't need to worry so much about that they are not equal. It's just not to break the threshold that we put for ourselves, right?
Exactly. And maybe just a link to throughput and predictability. Like one thing is, let's say you look at the throughput over 30 days. If you just have a number, not the visual, you might say we closed 30 items in this 30 days. It doesn't give you more input. If you now see this run chart, you can see, is it evenly distributed? Or is it kind of, you had 4 days where you closed all those items and the other days nothing was closed? And that's quite a different conversation you're having. Just theoretically, like a perfectly predictable team would close exactly the same amount of items every day. So for example, you close 1 item every single day within 30 days. And the very unpredictable team would close 30 days on 1 single day, right? Those are the 2 extremes. Most likely you don't have them because, again, weekends and so on. But our goal, to link back to the beginning and my story, was more predictability. So if you look at this, is how can we get the large bars down and limit the work days where we have zeros, right? So kind of how can we even it out more, and then we will have a more predictable system. And I would say one way to do that is, as you mentioned already, kind of get your cycle time under control. So trying to lower this, look at your percentiles there, really discuss it with your team and define a meaningful SLE. Like if you're right now at 25 days, it doesn't help if you say it should be 3 days, because probably that's a bit stretched to go there, even if it may be your long-term goal, but kind of setting small steps where you can reflect on, like on a certain cadence, are we getting better as well?
And this also shows how wrong we can be if we only talk averages.
Yes.
Yeah, right. That
exactly.
It's like forbidden. If you do Kanban, you're forbidden to use average as anything. Why? And I'm just laughing now, but there is a book that's called Flow of Averages, and you can check that. I love this line from it that it says plans based on average assumptions are wrong on average.
Exactly.
And because that would happen, what you say, and we so many times not only use estimates that we know already are not really reflect how long it takes to do something, and somehow we decided to decouple it from how long it takes, right? So create this very philosophical discussions of, in the end you have to tell when it will be done. But no, in the meantime, we will just focus on thinking how it's a complexity and not time. And it's like head explodes, and you still are no closer to really predict something. And then you, on top of that, use an average for it. Like, what can go wrong, right?
Exactly. Like, I don't know, we probably don't have time to go too deep into this, but more or less you could assume that maybe your average is as good or even a bit worse than like your 50% chance, right? So it's, but you communicate it as this is when we will be done, and not there is a 50% chance that then it will be done. That would already change a conversation, I think. But yeah, it's a bit the issue of using averages.
At least you give that percentage of risk. And when we give the estimate, and we say every time, like, this is just an estimate, this is just the hands-on coding, it's still, you just turn around and it's becoming a deadline for the team, right? So it is funny. But as you mentioned, we don't have much time, but I would love to just go to see the work item age and how you have a chart for that and why it's important, because that's like, the work item age is a flow metric that's least talked about and probably the most important one. And somehow the message doesn't get there.
So we will skip over work in progress. So that's for another time.
Which have is a also chart. Important. Okay.
Of course, all of them are. Work item age is my favorite metric, and we have a chart for it. But I think you should see your age in whatever tool you're using, in kind of, if you're using Jira with boards, for example, or Azure DevOps with a board, or even a physical board if you're all in the office. I think that's where you should see your age. So as soon as you start working on an item, like, that's my favorite way to visualize it. So
it's always
actively
there,
encouraging
right?
you, exactly, that if, for example, you're doing dailies or whatever you're calling it, that you look at this and you just look at the oldest item and think about, how can we close this today? Who is needed? What is needed? And how can we kind of progress with this one? And if this is the only thing you talk about in your daily, that is time well spent.
Oh, you're revolutionizing the daily now.
So like there is this joke that you can, every time you start an item, you put the banana peel on that item, right? And then you see how it ages, and it doesn't age, or it doesn't look good. It probably doesn't smell good over time. So you want to get
this one. Yeah, makes sense. So work item age is basically the time that is elapsed since the work got started until the moment we look at it.
Exactly.
And those are our outliers, right? Those are the moments where we see, oh my God, this is already getting out of hand, and it will increase the cycle time for the whole system. That's why we also don't love the columns that are like blocked column, right? Because it's like a trash bin a bit. We put something in the block column, and our brain is great in just not
it's over
taking
there.
into
We don't
account
have to
what we don't need. So it's there, we don't have to look at it and worry about it. And then you go and you have so many items there. And some of them, it's like, do you even need to work on them anymore if nobody asks?
Yeah, it's funny when you look at this data and you have like items that are in progress since 1,215 days. And it's like, if nobody asked about it, I guess we don't have to spend more time on it. But who am I?
Exactly. But we still spend time. We have to like spend time asking, spend time doing something about it. So it is taking from our time.
Yes.
And we are not bringing not using this time to bring value to the customer. So it's basically wasted time. So yeah, and here we see again the calendar days and the time the issues spent in progress.
Yes,
Yeah?
so there are other tools like there you also see maybe your workflow, like the different columns. Here it's really just in total how long has it been in progress. But again, if you have the way, and I think there are ways for Jira and Azure DevOps to visualize it on your cards, that's usually the best, because you should really look at this one every day. And to link back to the SLE, so if you have an SLE, let's say of 12 days, what I would recommend is once you're getting closer to that SLE, color it orange. Let's say if you hit 9 days, you're quite close already to like that it takes longer than your SLE. So you should really focus on this. And once you are at or over your SLE, then maybe it's becoming red or whatever color you prefer, because this is like, okay, what are we doing with this item? How can we close it? What is stopping us from closing it? Because we're breaking our commitment in a way. So like, and this is really then the goal, that like this helps you getting into the flow, right? And if somebody is working on an item that is 2 days in progress, maybe we can just ignore that for a day or two. Like that may not be ideal, but it's still better because we can afford the time, like that this item waits a bit, and instead that person may help to get the other thing to the finish line or over the finish line. And that's really a great conversation starter, and it gets you out of this, yesterday I worked on stuff and today I work on stuff and I also have meetings, so yeah, whatever. And getting to actionable discussions and making it useful, right, for the team members as well.
Yes. And I love this part because it's not like, oh, we're just selling you. And I love in Spain, they have this saying of, I'm selling you the motto, like just trying to sell something for you. So we're not just selling you the magical solution that if you use the Flowmetrics, suddenly your life will be so much easier. No, we show you the different way, but we also show you techniques and questions and ways that you can ask yourself every day, how can I improve my flow and improve my system so that I can really trust the metrics that I see and they can become a good and to help to get where I want and to my commitments as well. So it's not just, oh, like we get caught up on this perfect estimate. One day in our life, we'll get the perfect estimate. No, that's the fairy tale. Here it's, okay, hands on. You have this system. We give you all the tools and you please go manage the work. Right. And I love that saying of manage the work and let people self-organize around it. If you teach them well, if you educate them how to use the metrics that they see, they can make best decisions on their own. And you don't need to be the manager that just sat there and like, why aren't you tackling that big item item?
And this is cool because, like, let's say you're doing retrospectives like in Scrum, or you have some other improvement meetings and somebody has an idea. This is an hypothesis, right? And now you have the metrics, so you can say, oh, we would like to decrease our cycle time. Let's try to do more programming, right? Maybe that brings it down, and maybe that works, maybe it doesn't, but you have the data now. So if you try it for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and then you look at your metrics again, you can confirm your hypothesis, or maybe it didn't change anything. And then you can say, well, we tried and sometimes things don't work out, which is perfectly fine. But at least you have some data to like look back, like, and did our experiments work? And it's not just like gut feeling, but really concrete data to base your decisions on, which is nice. Like, doesn't mean we should ignore gut feeling completely, but there is some combination of gut feeling and does the data also support my gut feeling? Or am I just seeing what I want to see now because, I don't know, I like that way more and I want it to be better, even though it may not be.
Definitely, because what you say and what Colleen said on the latest episode, she said that we will pass through those stages of grief.
Yeah. Yes.
You see the metrics, and at the beginning, you will probably not like them because that's not what we wish for. And that's not what we tell the client and then we have to like undo what we said because sorry, from what we see it will not be as fast as we thought. But then you get all those tools and then you can base and make the experiment, as you say, like add your gut feeling, use the tools, see if it works. If it didn't, well, next time we try again until we get there. And it will never be perfect as well. That's not what we aim for. It's just to, first of all, be more predictable, but second of all, as well, give this part of risk that there will always be risk. It's unpredictable, really. It's uncertain. The work we do is very uncertain, and there's a lot of interruptions and things that really influence how we do. And it will never be perfect, but at least it's least wrong. I don't know if that's a good finish line, that we will never be perfect, but at least we can be more I think reliable or predictable, right? Somehow.
Yeah, I would say so. Yes. And yeah, again, I think it's not about perfection, because if you're suddenly perfect, then most likely somebody is gaming the metrics or the tool. Like what some people ask is, how can I exclude outliers? And it's like, yeah, you don't. That's exactly the point, that you look at outliers and think about them. Don't try to fake a chart here, because then it will not be useful. And I think this is the hard part. And maybe if you're a Scrum Master or team coach or whatever, like this is also where you can really help the team and deliver value to your team and organization, right? Thinking about how can we bring these numbers down or up if it's throughput, for example, or what can we do with it? Then what would we need to do to be able to do probabilistic forecasting in a more accurate way? But that's kind of the hook for maybe another conversation in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. This really helps. I think we are doing like a small tutorial for, okay, we have the Scrum team and now we want to start looking at the metrics. Where do we start? This is what we already did. And I think it would really work to have another session and talk about probabilistic forecasting and Monte Carlo and how we can use that to predict and show forecasting. And this way we have like the whole cycle.
I think that was my journey, at least, as well. And then you never really look back from there, and you can still do Scrum, or you can choose to not do it anymore. That's up to you. But I think whatever you're doing, like if you're in software development, these metrics can really be a game changer. And like having a way to visualize them in one way or another and look at them with your team, I highly recommend this to everybody that works in this space.
And don't forget that we both are pro Kanban trainers. We are happy to host a training in your company. Actually, we could do it together, right?
Yes,
it would
exactly.
be really cool, because it really is a part of this like liberation, that we don't have to try really hard. We just need to understand a few basic rules and everything flows. And from there, you just try to improve the flow. You focus on one thing and not trying to see how best to do the poker planning or so. I'm really hoping it's like let's liberate people from the estimation mess. Thank you so much for joining today and for taking the time and explaining your tools. I will link in the description the link to your metrics, how we can leverage that and everybody can use them. And let's see you on the next episode. We already said it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this already.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.